Hello everybody and welcome to Lecture 4 on my short Psych 101 series. This is Dr. Peterson, and what we're talking about is, now that we've defined psychology and looked at different areas of psychology in practice and a science, and understanding that it is both a science and a practice, what I want to go into is the different philosophical backgrounds that psychology grew from. Now, as I go through this lectures 4 through 8, I want to just make a short warning that I'm giving a very simplified version of these philosophical backgrounds. These arguments actually are very complex, and the individuals that gave these arguments gave very complex arguments for them. I'm giving a very simplified version of these just to provide an understanding and a context of these classical problems that psychology has inherited through the years and still today are trying to figure out. Not only psychology, anthropology, sociology, even the physical sciences is trying to answer these different types of questions that we're talking about today, but these are ones that psychology has definitely taken on. But I do want to just give this warning. I'm giving the very simplified version of these different questions and of these different people who are bringing up these different arguments. And the first philosophical question that psychology has always been grappling with is the nature versus nurture question. And the two individuals that these questions have grown from are two individuals from classical Greek era, Plato and Aristotle. Now, Plato and Aristotle were students of the great philosopher Socrates. And if anyone knows anything about Socrates, he's the great orator who gave us the Socratic method of argument, where we argue things through to come to some final conclusion about the meaning of life and the meaning of existence. And he gave very rational reasonings, and he gave us our first, well, not our first, but schools of thoughts. And when he passed away, both Plato and Socrates were hoping that he would give the school to one of these two gentlemen, and Socrates, of course, gave the school to Plato, and that created a rift between Plato and Socrates. So between Plato and Aristotle, and so Aristotle left, and Plato took over Socrates' school, and Plato took on a very different answer to our abilities and who we are. And he looked at the world, and he found that there's order in the world based upon our lineage, meaning who we were born from. And he looked at the world and he saw that there's order. There's the structure of the world, that there's the rich and there's the poor, there's the working class and there's the merchant class, and there's the aristocratic and there's the rulers. And all of these individuals tended to be within the same family lineage. And he came to assume that the skills to be within that class were passed on from father to son, mother to daughter, and the like. And so that basically who we are, our inherited traits, they come, for Plato, came through our blood, that our lineage is through our blood. So who we are is biologically based, that we are who we are because of who our parents were. And so we are in the places that we are, and this is where we belong because that's where our parents came from, and so on and so on. Aristotle, on the other hand, after he was rejected by Socrates, went to find his own school, and he's going to take a different view. Aristotle was one of our first naturalists. In fact, when we look at the lineage of and the plantage of different plants and the separation of different animals and stuff like that, those things started with Aristotle. So we have the differentiation of plants and trees and stuff like that. Those started from Aristotle and Aristotelian ideas, that there's these separations, and he came up with this cataloging system of the like. But through this exploration and this cataloging of plants and rocks and trees and animals, he noticed that the health of a plant, for example, and we'll use a plant as an example, the health of the plant really determined upon its environment. If it was in a nurturing soil and it got the right amount of water and the right amount of sunlight, it flourished and it was healthy. But if it was in a dry, arid area and the plant didn't get enough sunlight and was in poor soil, it tended not to thrive. And so Aristotle took on what's called the nurturing argument, that we are who we are based on our environment, and it's our environment that really determines who we become and who we are health-wise and nurtured-wise. And this is called the nurture approach. And so let's fast forward in Western history and let's look at this. So in modern terms, if you're a pure naturist, you're more likely to believe in things like genetics. You're more likely to believe in physical medication to alleviate things like depression and anxiety, and that everything is biologically driven. You're more likely to take on the nature approach of life, and your ideas are more grounded in the biological realm of things. If, on the other hand, you truly believe in things like education can change the trajectory of your life, that how your parents treat you determines a lot of your outcomes, how the family system influences the individual, that determines things like personality and health. You're more on the nurturing end, okay? Now, we can argue that we're probably a combination of both, and there is that argument that we're a combination of both our biology and our environment, and that's definitely an argument. And really, where we are today is in any one specific situation, what is more of a determinant, our genetics, our biology, or the environment? And that's really kind of where the state of things like genetics versus social environment is today, is how much of something is a genetic determinant versus how much is something an environmental determinant. And I'll tell you today, it is a jumbled mess, and you'd be very careful to say anything is purely biological versus anything is purely environmental when it comes to behavior, mental processes, and even things like our physical health. When we get to social psychology, for example, and we say things like how long we live, for example, health-wise, disease states, we always talk about with disease and the like, we talk about things like do we exercise, do we smoke, do we drink, do we eat right, and we talk about do we visit doctors often, all those kind of things, and we say those are the determinants of whether we get a disease, whether we live long, and all of those things. Yet, from a psychological perspective, loneliness, whether we feel socially connected to someone else, is actually statistically a better predictor of whether we get a disease and how long we live than is smoking, obesity, our eating habits, and our exercise. So here we have this contradiction between the nature side of things and the environmental nurture side of things, in that nurture in this case actually predicts what you would think nature predicts better. So it's kind of an interesting argument that we will get into later in this course, where we think nurture should trump nature should trump nurture, but indeed nurture actually trumps nature. And then there are some cases where nature actually trumps nurture in psychological processes. Some good examples are some psychological disorders. It is actually a medication treatment, not psychological treatment, that is better to treat some disorders that you would think environmental treatments would do better for. So we have a lot to say about this nature-nurture thing. What I would say at this point is we need both worlds. We need to pay attention both to our biology, but also to our environment and to the people we bring into our life.